been able to distract yourself with new movies this summer, you may have been sorely disappointed. Ever since the coronavirus first hit the US, the film industry has been struggling to come to terms with the new circumstances under which movies must be produced, released, and viewed. As the situation has continued to evolve over the past 8 months, the question remains, will the film industry be able to bounce back from the pandemic, or will it leave a lasting dent? Theaters closed down as soon as the coronavirus first hit the US hard back in mid-March. Movie production throughout the country was halted for essentially the first time since the advent of the Nickelodeon in 1905. Immediately, distributors began rushing to put the current releases in theaters onto streaming platforms and video on demand, trying to minimize their losses. Anyone who is looking to see movies like John Wick 4, The French Dispatch, or any future installments in any of the Marvel movies is going to have to wait. Many of these films were pushed back a year or more from their initial release date, and it's still unclear when things will begin to return to normal, leaving future releases up in the air for studios. The film industry couldn't stay on pause for long, and studios quickly found ways to begin to adapt to the new conditions, namely through digital releases. Trolls World Tour, released soon after COVID-19 began shutting down theaters throughout the country, made history when it broke the record for the biggest opening day and opening weekend for a digital title, topping every digital platform. While Universal was clear about giving their other anticipated movies later theatrical release dates to accommodate for COVID-19 restrictions, movies like Trolls World Tour are unlikely to be extremely successful in theaters to begin with, making them good candidates for digital-only releases. Kids movies also tend to perform better post-theatrical release, through rentals, purchases, or on streaming services because parents can use those movies as repeated sources of entertainment for irritable children. In addition to an increase in digital-only releases, the pandemic has also caused a wave for the often forgotten drive-in theater. The United Drive-In Theater Owners Association estimates that at the height of their popularity in 1958, there were 4,063 drive-in theaters in the US, compared with just 305 remaining drive-ins left as of 2019. While drive-in theaters pre-COVID-19 were a dying breed, the pandemic has in many ways revived them, if only temporarily. Not only do drive-ins allow viewers to go out and see movies in a way that complies with current COVID-19 related health measures, but they also provide audiences with a sense of nostalgia for happier pre-pandemic times. For the most part, drive-in theaters have been showing fan favorites like The Empire Strikes Back, Goonies, or Jaws, all of which have earned additional millions over the summer as a result of drive-in showings. Ghostbusters broke the previous record for live-action movies when it briefly topped box offices over the summer for the first time in 36 years, a product of increased ticket sales due to drive-ins and a lack of competing material. As studios started releasing movies outside of digital-only platforms, some new releases, like The Wretched or Bill and Ted Face the Music, have also been shown in drive-ins over the summer to compensate for regular theaters not being open. While it's unclear whether or not this boost in popularity will last, many drive-ins have done better over the pandemic than they have in decades, some even being able to reopen after being on the brink of permanent closure. Around mid-August, regular theaters began to open up again, with new measures put in place to accommodate for COVID-19, mainly through limits on attendance, mandatory mask wearing, and increased sanitation. While theater executives were betting on people clamoring to see movies in person again, so far audiences have been largely unwilling to buy movie tickets and risk their health for such a limited selection of new releases. Health officials have continued to encourage viewers to stay home or attend drive-ins as an alternative to regular theater going while the pandemic continues. But this development, along with movies still being shown in drive-ins, has made it possible for movies to be able to simultaneously top box office charts and on-demand charts, a feat that was previously essentially impossible due to the large window between when movies are released in theaters and when they are allowed to be released digitally. Over the summer, both The Rental and The Tax Collector, unnoteworthy films under normal circumstances, became the second and third movies of all time to simultaneously top box office and video on-demand charts. Yet another film record broken thanks to the pandemic. In terms of the big movies that got theatrical releases, this summer only saw a few. Christopher Nolan's long-awaited movie Tenet was the biggest movie of the season, bringing in $20 million domestic. Disney's poorly received The New Mutants was the second biggest summer blockbuster, bringing in around $12.3 million, followed by Unhinged at $11.8 million, The SpongeBob Movie with $3.3 million, and Bill and Ted Face the Music, which earned $2.3 million as of mid-September. Many of the movies released over the summer underperformed significantly, making little to no money in comparison to how much these films cost to produce and advertise. If this is a trend that continues, we may see studios begin to produce less costly movies, anticipating lower earnings. As of right now, the global film industry has suffered a revenue loss of $7 billion as a result of the pandemic, and it's projected that losses will be as high as $17 billion. These monetary losses will present themselves in a number of ways, possibly even changing the way the film industry functions permanently. For one thing, we may see an increasing number of movies released both theatrically and digitally, close to or at the same time. Under normal circumstances, there's a window of about 3 months between when a movie is released theatrically and when a movie is allowed to be released on demand or digitally. Studios have been trying to shorten this window for years, which would allow them to capitalize on both in-theater revenue and digital revenue. But theater chains have refused to shorten it in order to protect ticket sales. Because theater chains have been closed all summer, they no longer have the leverage to keep this window open. If audiences get used to the simultaneous releases, theater chains might have a hard time getting things back to how they used to be, even after COVID is out of the picture. COVID-19 has also made it extremely difficult for studios to do things like casting, set design, costume design, and post-production, which, unlike work in other industries, rarely occurs remotely. Thus far, we've talked a lot about the film industry in traditional respects, but by far the main way people have consumed media over the pandemic was through streaming services. Early on, streaming services like HBO, FX, and Showtime immediately prepared for the long haul, spacing out the release of new media in order to be able to continue releasing material over the following months. Netflix, on the other hand, has been one of the first major streaming services to mass-produce original content, meaning much of their 2020 material was already shot, giving them the freedom to not have to heavily change their original content release schedule to fit for COVID. The average US consumer currently pays for 4 different streaming services, up from 3 since pre-COVID times. For years, traditional movie theaters have viewed streaming services as a threat, and that threat is apparent now more than ever. Streaming services are able to offer audiences a wide range of easily accessible content in a way that traditional theaters never have. And while it's highly unlikely that theaters will die out anytime soon, the pandemic has given us just a glimpse of what that reality might look like. Ultimately, we're going to have to wait and see how the film industry actually changes as a result of all this. It's possible that everything reverts back to its pre-pandemic state in just a few months. But at least for now, it's looking like the pandemic will leave at least a few lasting impacts on the film industry. For now, all we can do is stay at home and hope for the best.